New AP-NORC polling finds a clear shift in U.S. public opinion. Roughly half of American adults now say Israel's military response in Gaza has gone too far. That level, a notable rise from earlier in the conflict, reflects growing concern across broad swaths of the electorate, with the largest increases among Democrats and independents and more modest movement among Republicans. The poll shows the change is not uniform. Democrats registered the biggest increase in criticism. A strong majority now say Israel's actions have been excessive, substantially up from the figure recorded in late 2023. Independents have also moved toward greater skepticism, with roughly half expressing the view that the response has gone too far. Republicans remain less likely to say the same, though there has been a small upward shift among them as well. Rising humanitarian worries help explain some of the shift. The poll captures heightened concern about civilian suffering in Gaza, including displacement, widespread infrastructure destruction, and severe shortages of food, water, and medical supplies. American support for humanitarian relief to Palestinians has increased modestly. A substantial share now rates providing aid as very or extremely important. At the same time, there is reduced emphasis, especially among Democrats, on U.S. military support for Israel. The proportion of Democrats who say military backing of Israel is very or extremely important has declined sharply compared with earlier in the conflict. The polling also finds growing public interest in political solutions. A larger share than before says establishing an independent Palestinian state is an important U.S. policy goal, though opinions on that question are sharply divided by party. Roughly half of Democrats view statehood as highly important, while far fewer Republicans and only a minority of independents say the same. Similarly, the priority Americans want the U.S. government to pursue has shifted somewhat. Humanitarian relief and diplomacy have become more prominent compared with a near-exclusive focus on Israel's security that characterized some earlier public responses. These shifts occur against a backdrop of intensified fighting and a deepening humanitarian emergency in Gaza, which likely helped focus public attention on civilian costs. High-profile international statements and media coverage emphasizing civilian casualties, displacement, and conditions described by humanitarian groups appear to correlate with a change in public sentiment. The poll underscores that as images and reports of civilian suffering mount, public tolerance for broad or indiscriminate military operations declines, at least among many U.S. adults. Partisan polarization, however, remains a defining feature. While Democrats have moved decisively toward critical views of Israel's military tactics, Republicans remain far more supportive of Israel's security priorities and less inclined to see the military response as excessive. That divide affects preferences for what Washington should do next. Democrats are more likely to press for ceasefires, humanitarian corridors, and diplomatic pressure, while Republicans more often prioritize Israel's ability to respond to security threats. Age and education also correlate with opinion. Younger Americans and those with higher levels of formal education are more likely than older or less educated respondents to say Israel has gone too far. Geographic differences are less pronounced but mirror national partisan patterns in many areas. The poll's broader takeaway is that public opinion on the Gaza conflict is dynamic and responsive to continuing events on the ground. While a sizable segment of Americans continue to prioritize Israel's security needs, a growing portion judges the scale and methods of Israel's military response to be excessive, a view that has become especially pronounced among Democrats and independents and is accompanied by increased support for humanitarian assistance and diplomatic solutions. Policymakers tracking public sentiment should note the trend. Sustained media attention to civilian suffering and expanding humanitarian crises can shift public priorities rapidly, turning what may have been initial expressions of sympathy or support into demands for restraint, relief, and political resolutions. The AP-NORC results provide a snapshot of that shifting terrain and suggest that U.S. political calculations regarding the conflict will need to account for a public that is both polarized and increasingly sensitive to humanitarian consequences.